Hello every folks and good morning. Okay, so I just wanted to make a video here of just kind of miscellaneous stuff that has been kind of coming up in the post game here, just fun discoveries, little bits and pieces here, all of that kind of thing. To kind of see if any of this information might be useful for you. A lot of these things are little kind of individual bits and pieces, like for example, a little bit of a correction on drop mechanics and things like that. After testing it a bit more, and how some of the stuff works in Palace of the Dead at this point. So it's going to be a whole collection of just like little miscellaneous end game, post game kind of stuff here. So let's go ahead and get going on this. First of all, if you missed it before, once you actually beat the game, you get access to world mode. It's interesting. If you stay in your original timeline, the game doesn't immediately start scaling up on you. So, like, for example, if you've played the PSP version, once you got to New Game Plus, or you got into the post-game, if you ran into enemies out in the wild, they started actually carrying, Enchiridion gear and stuff like that. They started actually having all of this crazy equipment with them. They started scaling up. So it turns out if you stay in your original timeline, at least as far as I can tell, even up to level 45, they didn't seem to do that, but as soon as I went and switched into world mode, then it suddenly was like, hey, guess what? It's party time, we're all coming in with friggin' worm scale. So it became a pretty massive difficulty spike there, so that was interesting. But yeah, it seems like, I'm assuming probably like once you go through Coda once, maybe you go through again in world mode. I'm not sure. But just found that kind of interesting. Second thing, Palace of the Dead has changed a little bit here. So, I'm not currently in the Palace of the Dead in the save file here, but the way that it works is seemingly way more forgiving than it used to be, at least as far as drops are concerned. So back in the SNES version, it was more or less random. Like you had a lot of your, Wind God weapon type of stuff that you'd have to go collect in order to go pick, kill off Nibith, and then you come back and then you collect all the Wind God weapons from. Oh, man, whoever decided that it needed to be 3 of them in Palace of the Dead, and then you have to leave, go to San Bronza, get the last one, then come back and do Palace of the Dead again. Just, light smack on the back of the head on that one. But anyway, let's just say it was very difficult to get access to Chaos Frame. That's why I was showing that once you get access to World Mode, you just have access to the Chaos Frame counter right away. Additionally, so as far as drops in Palace of the Dead go, they don't seem to be fixed completely. That is to say, I think they're either way more stacked than they were before, or there's just an absolute overwhelming just abundance of all of these different things available. Like for example, I got 2 wing rings from one fight. I got 2 grease rings from one fight. In one case, I've seen potentially up to 3 dragon scales dropping. In terms of crafting books, I think all the Enchiridions have actually been moved to Palace of the Dead. Actually, I'm looking for the inventory right here for that reason. If we go over to the recipes, so if we go down here, we go down to the very bottom to the Enchiridions. I got body armor, got bow, fist, leg guard, arm guard, helm, 2H, spear, axe, cudgel, dagger. 2 versions of dagger and cudgel, by the way. The 2 cudgel Enchiridions literally dropped right next to each other. Got katana there as well, I believe. Actually, no, katana, I believe, was from the elemental temples. So point being, it seems like all the Enchiridions might be just in Palace of the Dead now. Additionally, again, a lot of these drops seem to be fairly stacked, and I want to put out a little fix here as far as the drops go, because I actually completely misunderstood what was going on here when I was doing the earlier videos. So can confirm at this point that, yes, the enemies do steal your stuff, but you can kill them to get it back. And it does remain that if an enemy steals your stuff and then you kill them, and then that bag drops on top of another bag, the 2 bags will combine. But yes, there is a kind of stealing your shit back mechanic, so to speak. So apologies for getting that wrong earlier. I was trying to figure out why on earth... like, I knew for a fact that enemies had picked them up, and then I never saw another bag drop, and ended up getting those things. I finally got an answer on that as well. Because after going through Palace of the Dead, I started noticing if you kill a ghost as the final enemy, or if you kill any enemy as your final enemy, they won't drop anything, because I believe that is automatically converted into a drop. The ghost will not even fall on the ground, they will disappear and become a drop. I've tested this by just going and clearing out the entire map, picking up all bags, killing off a ghost as the final enemy, and finding that yes, it did still give a drop. So it seems like yes, final enemy is just converted into a drop regardless of whatever else is going on there. So that's kind of an interesting thing there. Another random note on relics, by the way. So relics are basically this, you can technically get into it in Chapter 4, but it's kind of intended to be more of a post-game thing. Bear in mind, just again to issue another correction here, I originally believed that this was a bug in the game. It turns out that yes, it actually was just enemies stealing them, and then I ended up knocking them into pits. That's why I didn't end up getting those items. Anyway, so in this case, we see that when it comes to relics and such, it turns out that they're not universally better or worse. Like right here, I have a dragon scale that's been upgraded 3 times. It's maxed out 2 of its things here, but even still, it technically is going to be worse than the one that was crafted at the store, to some degree. Like, granted, these scaling elemental affinities are pretty darn nice. But, for example, the crafted version will still have the ability to inflict poison, which, by the way, it's Poison Cloud instead of Poison Breath this time, which, I mean, technically it throws away some of the flavor, but honestly, it's just far more useful. But it's kind of interesting that just the raw defensive stats of the scaled one are just better. It's just a neat little thing. Also, technically, it does more damage versus dragons, but oh well. So, as far as rings go, it doesn't seem like the initial stats or the attack and defense values change much. Like for example, if we go between the 2 wing rings that I ended up getting, like these ones, I don't even really see much of a reason to go and upgrade because it's like 1 to 2% difference on defense, but you have to sacrifice the ability for somebody to fly. Which, by the way, this right here, like, I have been absolutely loving using Tammuz with this complete nonsense Weeb Knight situation all throughout Palace of the Dead. Just steadfast with flight and 2 swords, 1 for parrying, 1 for countering. Like, well, I couldn't figure out how to do each one individually, so I just figured I'd kind of carry 1 sword for each thing. I've got this completely figured out. The man just sits here and snacks on steak all day. But any dang ways, like, just stacked vitality and resistance. He is just a pillar here to make sure that we always manage to get the bags in Palace of the Dead now. So just so you know, yes, the relic drops, they do seem to be pretty solid in their own right, but there are different variants. So for example, now that I've gone into world mode, if I go into, like, let's say Farampa here, they will start spawning with things like the Crescent Bow, like they usually would in the high-level version of PSP, but the Crescent from Palace of the Dead is technically different. By the way, another question that I saw come up a lot is whether or not you end up getting MP items at any point. Now, so far, even into world mode, I've only seen MP leaves picked up off the ground, which basically if you burn away tiles or if you walk onto certain tiles, you can just pick up MP leaves off the ground all over the dang place, so you just kind of get them at random. The drop locations seem mostly to be the same as they were in PSP. I've been following along, like, many folks were wondering if the old PSP guide would still work. Yeah, you can still follow the same drop locations. Those are still technically there. Again, this game is still technically, it's kind of a revision of the PSP version. Like, it's totally remade from, you know, a late portion of the PSP game. So, mechanically, a lot of the old stuff is still there, like the drop locations of all those random leaves and things, because what insane person in the right mind is going to go and redo, like, thousands of drops like that? But just so you know, there is actually a alternative, and that's the Fruit of the Adept. So, when we go over to the crafting options at the store, which I was going to throw some Farampa in here, but whatever, we'll go in the background here. So if we go over to the shop over here and we go over to the craftables under the sundries, basically when it comes to cost effectiveness, like you get $240, Fruit of the Adept. It's the only item, as far as I've been able to find so far, that will give you MP and HP back. So this is 10% MP and HP, roughly equivalent to, in the end game, this is about like 36 MP per use, give or take. This is obviously going to vary based on how much MP a unit has. And you can technically make them go up quite a bit more, but at that point you're basically investing salves and leaves and seeds and all this other stuff. but realistically, you don't really, need to. This is just, this kind of just gives you a better place to use those leaves, because you can essentially heal and get MP at the same time. But yes, the only infinite MP item that seems to be around so far is for the Adept at 10% MP. There was another question, by the way, of I saw some folks having a little bit of a mini panic over the Shaman, insisting that, oh no, Nature's Touch is gone, how dare they, and no, it's still here. So it turns out, even into the post-game, you are still getting new skills, so bear in mind, I haven't even unlocked the full, complete, level cap here, so Nature's Touch showed up at 45 for me. There was another question also as far as Nature's Whisper, and just kind of elemental affinities in general. So prevailing element, for those that don't know, basically, if you use different spells, they will increase the map's tendency towards those elements in a particular way, increasing the maximum damage of that element. So if they manage to blow past armor and whatever else, you can essentially get ludicrous numbers going with this, but bear in mind, it is a very slow climb. But anyway, so in this case, for example, if we were to use something like Aqua Blast or Acid Rain, it might boost up tendency by 1 or 2, but if we were to use an Apocrypha like Dread Vapor, that would end up making it go up by 4. But if we were to go use a water-based finisher, like I believe we have on Deneb over here, that would make it go up by 2. That much I've been able to confirm. I'm sure there's other little interactions there as well. And yes, I did find it hilarious to give the Flirty Witch a whip in the grease string. Any dang ways, moving on. So yeah, as far as that goes, it's there if you want it. They actually did do a thing with the Elemental Temples this time around, where sometimes in the PSP version they wouldn't actually end up having their respective elements properly assigned. It wasn't an always case, but in many cases you could overwhelm the elemental temples there. They seem to start at 20 this time around. I forget what they actually started at in the PSP version, but I want to say it was just, I think it was 10 or something in that one. Either way, it's a very minor thing. It just basically means that prevailing elements in the elemental temples will usually end up staying, relatively up there. You'd have to use quite a few things to be able to push past that element. Another random thing here is as far as recruiting Sherry. Now, granted, this is more of a personal one than anything anybody complained about. I did finally end up getting her to trigger. For whatever reason, there seems to be, I guess rainy days may potentially be less common this time around or something. But when I know that when I went in, normally the strategy for getting her is you complete Haya Ban Hanuba, you go over to Fidok to unlock the northern push, and then at that point you go back to Balmamusa, and if it's rainy season, she just is there. Usually Olivia's starting thing is just available, her starting loyalty is the trigger to make it happen, and usually it's just good to go right off the bat. So the trigger is supposed to be that it is raining in that map. Now, technically speaking, the way that it's supposed to work, that is to say, the way that it worked before is that you would make it rain, like in the SNES version, you would just make it rain on that map and then just kind of trigger that map. In the PSP version, you would go to the map next to it, start a storm, and walk over. But realistically, the most consistent way was to go in for the rainy season and just keep running back and forth. So what I don't get, and I don't know if I missed something, admittedly I might have done something, but I did my usual route through trying to recruit her, and I went through all of Water Scale and all of Shadow Scale. Nothing. Okay, that's weird. So I tried making a storm happen on a training fight. Didn't seem to do anything. Waited until Storm Scale and Dark Scale. Okay, 2 more months, nothing. So I figured, okay, maybe they changed the timing on it, and then at that point I ended up going and doing the northern push. And unfortunately at that point, completing over here does actually completely prevent her from being recruited. Either way, so at that point, I just figured maybe they changed the trigger for her or something, and then others were saying that she was still here. So I'm not really sure why exactly it is that it was so much less likely this time. So please bear in mind, again, this doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually less likely. It is very likely that, it was just something weird that happened. I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe it was just bad luck. Maybe it was whatever. But either way, finally she did end up triggering the same way. So that for any folks that were wondering about that, yes, that was entirely just apparently me being dumb. And yes, she does still have the same triggers for being recruited. Another question that I saw was in regards to whether Pumpkinstoffles still breaks the text limit, and yes, he most certainly does. For anyone that didn't know, your text limit is supposed to be at 12. Pumpkinstoffles is always given an exception so that he can have his full name here. Now, technically speaking, let's go ahead and check that real quick. Is that still accurate? Because I thought they increased the text limit. So let's say lightning, rename. Let's see, input name. This is going to take forever with the Joy-Cons. So we go pumpkin. I don't even know why I'm trying this, because obviously he's already out of letters. Anyway, so just to kind of show there. But anyways, yeah, so Pumpkinstoffles is recruitable during Deneb's side quest there. He's such a weird case, 'cause, like, why would you specifically make this happen? But yeah, so yeah, if you want a unique little trophy here, you can make that happen. Oh, there was another question also as in regards to how crafting works in the post game here, because it's interesting. It's actually changed now. One thing that does bug me a little about the crafting is the fact that you still need these immunity items for upgrading the shields. It probably was just too much of a pain in the neck to change these. But for example, the reason that the Buckler +1 required the Illumina Nectar was that it gave you a silence or a silence immunity before. The Xenowine prevented stun. The Zolia drop prevented sleep. The Tower Shield prevented charm, though realistically, if you were going around cosplaying as a Roman, you probably weren't getting any anyway. Spiked Shield prevented poison. Balder prevented sleep. That's why you had a BOS enchantment on there. This was always a fun one because it made me think of the Grass Crest Shield from Dark Souls, which is funny because Dark Souls didn't exist yet. Which, now that I think about it, now that makes me think that Dark Souls had a Tactics Ogre Shield in there. Anyway, whatever. You'll never be able to not see those two as the same again. And anyway, so like this was the parry one, this was the deflect one, maybe it was the other way around, I forget. And all right. But yeah, for example, if you're wondering if the helm in Sheridian is still just the worm scale helm, yes. But it's actually, it's interesting because the requirements are the same, but it's a lot more difficult to get a hold of this time. So it actually is quite a thing to get a full set of worm scale. Like, I haven't seen any drop. Technically, I could just go and recruit them off of enemy units. Like, technically, the Crescent is available right now if I were to just go recruit an archer. But any dang ways. Actually, standard Crescent seems to be a lot more common these days, so that was nice to see. But look at this right here. So, like, endgame longbows, I've been running Siege +1 on my archers. It is not holding up at all. So, like, they're, once you break armor, sure, they're getting a lot of scaling bonuses, but they've been having a bit of a struggle. But then look at this right here. Like, immediately you get to Cupido bow right off the bat, so you can guarantee your stun shot, but that's the immediate upgrade to the Crescent as it was before. But then you also can upgrade the that Cupido straight into the Ixcamilles. The Ixcamilles can then upgrade into the Garuda, and then the Garuda upgrades into the Indra, and then presumably there's, I don't know, maybe they have some other one there as well. But it's just interesting to see that literally all of them just upgrade off of the standard Crescents at this point. By the way, just so you know, endgame economy, even with infinite money, endgame economy, in many ways, like, I feel like the thing that folks will probably be grinding the most this time around is going to come down to these crystals right here. So, in order to craft many of the pieces of equipment, like endgame armors, weapons, what have you, you need to have these crystals, and to get those, you need those crystallosaur. Now, those are a relatively uncommon drop from a lot of things in the post-game, but I gotta say, like, I've been struggling to even keep the core team functioning with those. Granted, you should have a pretty decent pile of them from the story itself. I just kind of made the dumb decision to craft a whole bunch of grenades using them sometime halfway through the game, so, you know, that's a bit of a thing. Anyway, okay, other random post-game tips, by the way. Something I didn't realize up until doing this, but this guy right here, this weird long-range suppression Terror Knight. Okay, so something I didn't realize up till recently is the fact that the Terror Knight is actually a far more kind of versatile answer to a lot of things than a lot of the specialists. So, for example, this incredibly dumb-looking build right here doesn't make any sense on paper, because he's effectively got a weapon that does no damage, can't counter, can't parry, but does give him plus spell range. But effectively, because he's a little bit bulkier, he can also get away with equipping full Balder for a little bit extra damage. But effectively speaking, this guy is more or less invisible. He rarely ends up getting hit by stuff because dude's so boring, nobody wants to pay attention to him. Whenever he does get hit, he ends up doing Draining Heart. Whenever he doesn't have anything better to do, he drains MP to essentially suppress stuff at long range. That, again, suppression sniper Terror Knight. But I can't help but notice that, yeah, when it comes to sleep, so I put concentration on there, put sleep back on him, just kind of for the hell of it, because they really don't have a wide variety of spells. They've got, like, instills, they've got drain, sleep, drain heart. They don't... This is about it for their actual spell availability. But sleep actually does work surprisingly well for countering things I never expected them to counter. So for example, Gorgon Key Golems, pain in the neck, but if you just put them to sleep, it turns out that, yeah, they can, this time, unlike the PSP version, they're, stuff like Gorgon Lock, stuff like Dragon Scale, stuff like Phalanx, it will turn off at the end of their normal turn. If they sleep through the start of their turn, it doesn't re-trigger. So effectively, it's a way for you to kind of have this invisible dude essentially sniping off somebody's defensive moves. So, interesting little thing there. Granted, an Enchantress or something like that would be far better at the job, but I think it's way funnier to see this dorky-looking dude in armor with a weapon that doesn't work just going and deleting stuff that way. Additionally, again, if you're going for those Fruits of the Adept, they are a very good carrier for those as well. Basically, just, I love that these have become something of a meme that you just throw Fruits of the Adept on absolutely everybody, because, you know what, they're just a solid item for everyone to carry around. But yeah, no. If you're wondering about Terror Knights and whether sleep is something that's useful for them there, like Enchantresses might be better off going and spamming poison or something like that. Witches might be better at spamming poison. You know, your heavy hitter casters might be better at dropping raw damage. Seeing these guys coming in with just sleeping stuff from a room away, pretty solid. 40% doesn't seem like much, but it works. It works surprisingly often. Again, this guy can functionally not attack, and he's done great. There's no reason that a build this stupid should have lasted me for practically the whole game and still continues to impress. Anyway, moving on here, something else that somebody pointed out recently is that apparently Berserk actually increases strength. That is to say, like Sanguine does its own, little boost up there, but apparently Berserk actually does increase physical damage. It doesn't just burst it into an AoE, so technically speaking, Berserk's definitely hit harder than before. And for anyone curious, yes, the old Dragon Fang still does poison, and essentially a Sanguine Berserk friggin' AoE is fantastic, and yes, you can combine that with Vigorous Attack from the Warrior to essentially guarantee an AoE Poison Slash on multiple units. It's a good time. I've been really loving the fact that even works, but either way, I just tested it once and was like, yeah, okay, you're immediately getting promoted to a higher end of the team here. Started decking them out in better gear and all of that kind of thing. Okay. Next kind of little dealy here. There was a question for some reason if you could get multiple copies of Apocrypha. Technically you always could, you just only get one that drops per run through the temple. Now, I believe this actually might potentially be changed a little bit. Like, I remember there were some situations back in PSP where I believe you could actually get them to spawn multiples of, like, if you got the Tier 1 and the Tier 2. So potentially there might be more to that there as well. Additionally, also, as far as summons go, I believe shamans were actually able to use summons back in PSP, but yes, they do have access to that as well. All right, next thing, as far as Deneb goes. So I was kind of laughing at the fact that Stirring Kiss was here again with the stop and hobble. It turns out this is better than I thought. It seems to be 100%. Like it says it has a chance. I have not seen that drop below 100% when I was testing it with her. So potentially might be a very solid option there. Another thing, there was a question over zombies and no incapacitations. I've yet to test this one because I've been routing. I'm planning to do a run relatively soon here of doing no incaps, no chariot, no buff cards. Like, that is to say, just treating the buff cards as lava and just avoiding those tiles entirely. And then no faces, so we just kill off every single unit with a Warren Report entry along the way. So I was testing, or rather, I was hearing that somebody mentioned that zombies apparently don't count for your end caps. So that'd be pretty neat to have there. I guess we can technically test that right here. Okay. So as far as POTD drops, I think we pretty much covered everything that I wanted to cover on that one. Just because, yeah, the drops there, like, have basically just been a huge notorious issue for quite a while back on PSP. So it'd be fantastic to see a situation where they're they're not suddenly an issue anymore. There was another question over the fact that when it comes to a lot of different casters, so they've all got their different roles, but when you get into the post game, what is it like? You've got the Enchantress bringing in your speed casting. You've got your kind of draconic access through the warlocks, which as of so far I haven't really seen a whole lot of draconic. Like, I've only seen the basic draconic stuff. I haven't gotten the expanded stuff yet. But there was a question over what exactly liches bring to the table this time around, because obviously stuff gets a little bit weird when it gets all out of kind of all out of whack, so to speak. You'll see what I mean in just a moment here. Man, there's going to take a lot to explain the numbers that we're about to see in this fight. So, okay, so liches effectively are, yes, technically like a generic version of your power casters, but they do still have a role even once you end up picking them up. So, if we look over at the lich here, Salvation, I feel like it was something that really didn't matter much in the PSP version, because realistically you could have just used Meditate, and then it was like, oh, great, they just have MP now. And Salvation just basically does this thing where it splits the MP of everybody in the circle and evens it out. On paper, that doesn't seem like much, but it's actually pretty darn handy. In fact, most of the time whenever a lich has been around, they've had this thing where they basically give the entire party infinite MP. It's pretty great. Just needs to trigger a couple times and you're all good to go. But I will say, an interesting note on that is the fact that you can potentially set it to the left of Meditate and essentially have it trigger before Meditate. So they will essentially take their MP bar, split it between the entire party that's in the area around them, so usually that's going to be all the other spellcasters, and especially if you have archers nearby who aren't using their MP for much, like assuming that you're not using them as finisher spammers or something. So in that particular situation, you can more or less have infinite MP for the entire party all of a sudden. Also, I feel like this was missed before, but I'm tempted to do this now just because I've been doing this little test over region locking a character in, like, right before the Pharrell fight, firing every unit, getting rid of all their equipment, and basically just seeing if there's a way to continue on with the game, because somebody just randomly asked me one day, and I figured, you know what, that might be an interesting thing to test. Oh, interesting. Okay, the Rude Bow actually counts. They can actually come in with relic variants. Interesting. It's not just the normal kind. So, like, the Crescent, they're coming in with the normal kind, but this guy has a Relic Rude Bow. All right, cool. That's really neat. So yeah, supposedly a lot of the drops are just kind of different this time around, so it'll be fun discovering what all of those are all about here. But anyway, so as far as region locking in Palace of or not Palace of the Dead, but as far as region locking in the Wildwood here, I don't know if I'll end up making a video out of that. It was more just a fun test, but assuming it all gets figured out, I basically already have a plan to get out of that soft lock. But if by any chance you have a idea for a soft lock that you want to have tested, do let me know, because I've been having a lot of ideas on how that could potentially be pretty darn fun. Again, the general idea of that one was just, like, say somebody ends up putting themselves in a position where they're again, all their units have died. Somehow Denim was the only one that survived the fight versus Vice, and in that particular test, I was just having them being a Terror Knight. So they end up just kind of having whatever skills are available, whatever class is available. They have no additional gear, no additional class marks, no recruit skills, importantly, and somehow they have to get out of that situation and get to the next fight. So in that particular case, I figured, you know what? He has no skill to his name, so we're just going to go and retreat fights while he builds up his axe skill. Had him as a Terror Knight because I didn't have any archer marks on that save file. And then figured, okay, you know what? The way that we handle this is actually pretty simple. Is we end up I think the guy was a lightning element, and there was a couple of units that were water elements, and effectively using the it was ice. It was ice versus air. So he has an ice element finisher that he can go use on this rune fencer over here. Now, granted, in this case, he's going to be a little bit different, but every unit has a chance to drop their class mark. So effectively, the plan was go to that guy, create a situation where he can be one-shotted, then essentially one-shot the guy and gain access to his class mark, use that class mark to then hire units, and then those units are then able to go win the fight. So while RNG wasn't exactly being particularly merciful for that one, it did actually turn out to be a viable strategy. So again, once it's all set up, I'll just make a video on that, but it was just fun to see that that was a thing. Okay. So another thing that I want to point out in the post game is what I've been saying for most of the main game, where a lot of your trickier weapons remain viable, does technically remain true for a decent chunk of it, but certain situations will definitely lead to more desperate situations. Like right here, Sarah has been consistently putting about 200s up to this point, but suddenly she ends up losing about half her damage because everyone's carrying around heavier armor across the board, as you may have picked up on earlier. So that's actually why a lot of our... again, this is just like New Game Plus stuff that happened in PSP, where hopefully all of this stuff happens late enough that folks that aren't interested in playing with the mechanics don't show up to that party, so to speak. But like, for example, this guy right here, he's got +4 vit on the Holy Comet. He's got +4 vit on this helmet, +6 vit on this Worm Scale, +3 vit on the Damask, another +2 vit off these chain leggings. Like, the dude is stacked for vitality, and that's why he's able to just completely ignore a lot of this armor that's coming in, but, you know, the spells will still shred him just fine. So I'm really hoping that a lot of the okay, I say I'm hoping. Realistically, a lot of the very, very new folks that have been showing up lately will not get here. I mean that in the nicest way possible, but many of the frustrations that I've seen at difficulty in Chapter 2 and stuff, I'm not thinking they'll probably run into that issue. Point being, if you were looking for a challenge, then the post-game definitely still delivers. Okay, so, there we go. Let's go ahead and slap one of these. A fun little interaction note, by the way, for parry and counter builds. Whatever weapon you put in your main hand will be used for all interactions. So, except for parrying, funnily enough. For some reason, like, despite the way that this guy's set up, I've seen situations where he will decide to parry with the other sword. So I believe there actually might be a way to test this, because I did switch his swords around. He started parrying with this one. So I believe that you might actually, like, it's been a little contrary, but I believe you actually might be able to stack two versions of parry. But we might be able to test that by just stacking those two versions of parry and seeing which one they block with. Because if they only ever block with one, well, then there might be a little bit of a problem. If if they end up using both, then we might be onto something. Either way, I'll test that one and kind of get back to you. But alright, so in this particular case, we're just going to sit here. As far as what's available in the post-game, realistically, I would recommend doing the Elemental Temples before getting into the post-game at all, because stuff definitely ramps up pretty hard there. Your basic gear, just like before, will be adequate to kind of get you through stuff, but it's not going to be ideal by any means. So just kind of plan around that if you are planning to do, all of the like Coda chapters and things like that, might be something that you want to pay attention to. So I'm going to make a separate video on archers. Anyone wondering about archer viability, I feel like they just keep scaling harder and harder as far as the game goes. I'm pretty certain that once they end up getting to those top tier bows, we're probably going to see a situation where they're probably going to be hitting like their old PSP variants. But yeah, they seem to still have consistently kept that same balance up to this point. Another random note that came up ages ago on Poison Rain, by the way, as far as whether it has a chance to poison, yes, it still does. It seems to be a fairly low chance that I believe is based off of Mind Score, so that that could be why some folks have maybe not seen it coming up as often. Additionally, also I've noticed that crits have started working weird in the post-game here, and I believe there might kind of be additional armor states for certain units. Like, I can't help but notice that golems seem to roughly take 25% less crit damage. A certain last boss ended up, again, having roughly 75% bonus damage rather than taking the full double. And I feel like, I want to say I saw a hoplite doing the same thing under some circumstances as well. Obviously, there's a lot going on, so it's a little bit hard to know without, Gibd and them digging through the code. It's like Gibd Rakes constantly dropping all that new info for us. But just kind of so you know, there seems to be something going on there. I can't really explain what. Okay, what else? It is a little bit weird, like when it comes to summons and Apocrypha and all that kind of thing. By and large, the summons just kind of seem to be the better deal of the two. In most cases, you're effectively getting the same range while also getting more damage for half the, well, not half, but almost half the MP cost. So I'm kind of expecting that Apocrypha will have some other property to it once the tier 2s drop, because as it stands, the basic variants seem to be a little lackluster. Like, Meditate has been landing enough that the extra, I don't know, 50 to 100 or so damage off of the Apocrypha has been kind of just fine. But in general, they seem to be strangely expensive this time around, like compared to how much they do. So hopefully that will end up improving as time goes on. Alright, so as you saw right there, it's just like PSP with the kind of post-game archers still actually being able to penetrate armor fine because they've got their higher quality bows. As it stands, yeah, like this team right now is completely not prepared for the post-game. I wasn't really expecting it to scale up when I started doing this particular test, because after the initial kind of run through a lot of like the Coda 1 world state, I really expected that maybe they would have that maybe they shelved the idea of fully scaling up units, but I'm really glad to see that they didn't. So that's been a fun little thing. Also, by the way, another interaction that I wasn't expecting. For some reason, when it comes to Resurrection, it seems like there's two different flavors. If there's an item, like for example with the spell for Resurrection, if you have Engulf triggering, it doesn't actually end up raising range, and it also doesn't seem affected by a staff. However, if you're using the Brynhildr, I believe it has a unique variant, because it actually does. It's like the Brynhildr will actually give you the extra range, meaning that you can more or less use it to, as I like putting it, airstrike the Jesus back into somebody, but it's a little bit interesting how high the range can actually go. And by the way, again, I feel like I'm going to have to, well, I feel like I'm kind of putting myself into this position, but just to clarify for the millionth time, the reason that archer is doing no damage is because the Siege Bow +1 is effectively the best of the store-made weapons before we get into the sort of god gear, so to speak, and they are functionally trying to hit a guy that is wearing armor made out of dragons. It's not going to do anything. She's literally just shooting at something for the sake of shooting at something. She is not optimized to fight this enemy. So yes, that will 100% be a normal situation that we're looking at right there, where they're simply not ready to take on that particular unit. In a more general sense, if you, well, just watch the Archer video. I'm going to make an Archer video right after this, just kind of showing how to make use of the Archers properly. For a lot of the newer folks, which there have been a lot of, that insist that the Archers are completely unusable. They're really good once you get down to the nitty-gritty of it, but anyway, dang whiz. by the way, one more interesting mechanical interaction that I forgot to mention. So back in... what was it? Back in... Okay, one more interesting mechanical interaction. So, apparently, I kind of ran into this yesterday. If you have a unit that is that's KO'd on top of a card, they actually will wake up and collect the card. So you can potentially have that kind of situation set up, where if you don't want a card to be picked up, you can KO a unit into it, and essentially once they're revived, they will collect that card. It is still considered underneath them. So however that ends up benefiting you, there you go. Now I'm going to end up having to double check these numbers later, because as it stands, we're now looking at a situation where I believe, I believe it's actually, I believe I've had 2 KOs so far, so the count should be at 501, and hopefully will stay at 501 once this octopus ends up going down. Again, sometimes you just do tests entirely wrong, these things just sort of happen. Now, out of curiosity, I believe he actually does have Aqua Veil active, so why on earth... Oh, he's got Dash active. Okay, so Aqua Veil does not stay permanently on. That's actually another thing that I've been kind of wondering about, but never really bothered to look into too closely. So yes, Aqua Veil will only last for 1 round, apparently, and or potentially might be burned when throwing a boulder. I'm not sure. Either way, it looks like Aqua Veil is something that that can't quite be saved up for later. Oh, nice. We got some worm scale sleeves. Yeah, those things are quite a doozy to actually make, so that's a pretty solid one there. Alright, so to confirm right there, you can see the little icon right there showing that it has a chance to poison. So yes, this does actually inflict poison. Just so we're 100% clear on that, it's just a chance to poison. So a chance is not a guarantee. So I believe it's something in the ballpark of like 20%, but realistically, its whole purpose is just... You kind of keep one of those... Like, the reason that I like using a zombie octopus for this is because they just kind of sit around, they eat hits, they come back to life because the AI almost never carries exorcism. They will come back to life eventually, and then they just sort of run up, and it's like, oh, well, I triggered Aqua Veil, and I happen to have, 50 MP available at the same time. I think we're just going to go ahead and, just attack 10 units at once, maybe drop some poison on there, might be a little bit fun. There we go. That's one of those golden situations when it comes to the Lich right there. It's like right there, she's up to 316, she's up to 228, she's up to 178. Basically, it just averages out everyone's MP, so if her MP is full, she will end up sharing it with everybody else, and then you can put Meditate to the right of it, so that it triggers afterwards, so she's able to still go in and take a nice big solid hit, while effectively feeding everyone else MP, but if it happens to trigger at the start of the round, then you'll be looking at a situation where she gets a full MP bar and can just kind of do whatever with it. And, it's just kind of generally handy as far as that goes. By the way, if you get flight rings, absolutely put them onto heavy units and archers and things. It just feels great to see them flying around. Absolutely love it. Like, I have Tammuz over there as a functionally unkillable brick wall of a unit, and he's just flying into position most of the time. Apparently, unlike the PSP version, by the way, they will just gladly hop down instead of flying off of cliffs. Interesting little detail there. Now, I believe this is actually... Now, I'm not 100% positive that it always did that, but I want to say it would be kind of in line with a lot of the other time saves that they've done. So, alright, so if this... And you saw right there, the final unit didn't drop a bag, didn't drop anything, he just disappeared. So his drop would just appear. That probably was those copper Obreths right there. But this does seem to apply to ghosts as well, so you don't need to exercise the final ghost with a Starfall or something. And okay. So let's go see our death counter, see if that zombie thing is actually true. That'd be pretty neat if it was. And sure enough, yeah, 501. So yeah, zombies don't count for incaps. Neat. Okay, so we can definitely run zombie octopi for no incaps. Beautiful. Okay, so I guess that's really all is there anything else I wanted to cover for this bit here? Oh, there was a big question over whether sword masters remain good into the end game. Yeah, 100%. They're awesome. Like, just in general, you barely have to do anything with them. Granted, they have like 6 stances now as opposed to the friggin' 20 or whatever of varying degrees from before. And I'm sure there's definitely a bunch. Like, I haven't seen the Charming Dance, for example. So realistically, there's certainly more to do with them that I haven't found at this point. Or is this... Yeah, we got Slow, we got Weaken. Actually, I should put a Weaken on there. That's pretty solid. But yeah, just having their dances be just MP, again, as they were in One Vision. They're functionally One Vision Swordmasters in everything except for sword options, which two-handed swords are still pretty awesome. Actually, as a additional note here, if we want to go take a quick peek, when it comes to the some of the endgame craftables, some of them have had their functions changed a little bit. So if we go over to craftables, now granted, I haven't gotten access to all of them, but we're just going to talk in some general terms here. So if you're looking for Poison Claws, I'm sure there's probably still going to be the Heaven General variant, but for example, the Tiger Banah here has still remained viable straight into post game. She still hits like a truck. She still hits 500 plus with this thing, and drops guaranteed poisons. It's still holding up great. Basically anything with over 100 attack seems to hold up just fine into the post game. The costs of some of these items are weird though. It's interesting. For example, right here you got the Dragon Claws, which I believe, based off all the other stuff that we've seen so far, should probably just end up being a normal drop from some post-game enemies. But like right there, plus 10 bonus damage versus dragons, that's pretty awesome. To upgrade to the Dragon Blades, though, which come with Spark Sphere this time around, interestingly enough, you gotta spend armor to do these. So there's a lot of little upgrades like this. Like, for example, it's interesting how to get the Predator Knife this time around, you have to go and make the Jamitar here, so you need some of those crystals in order to make the Jamitar, and then you need some of those crystals in order to make a Marauder Knife, and then you need both of those plus an orb in order to get the Predator Knife, and then you get your, basically 25% bonus damage off of this thing. So a lot of these weapons are just very expensive to get, which I gotta say, the Dragon Fang is looking more appealing than ever. Just because you don't have to take any additional steps to get it. That bonus damage is, as I'm sure any, dragon nearby would look at it, I imagine this, plus Berserk, plus Sanguine, plus True Strike, plus Dragon's Bane, is, as the kids say, some bullshit. Because that's guaranteed poison plus like 2,000 damage on that thing, so that is insanity. A little bit of a side note, I can't help but notice that they changed the look of the Valiant Dagger a little bit this time around. It's also not nearly as I guess technically it feels like it's not as good. It's technically still really good. It's really the Brilliant Dagger that was a good one. But I can't help but notice that they added a little bit more spike to the hilt of it, and one of the I believe they're trying to match one of the art pieces that shows this weird looking knife. As far as swords go, I haven't really noticed anything too crazy. Walloon, just is actually the latest thing that actually shows up under standard spawns at this point, because it seems like all non-elemental variants are fair game for them to spawn with. Headsman, by the way, doesn't come with any Lament bonus. It's actually Dark Headsman's the ones with the Lament bonus. Okay, so never mind. Technically don't have access to Dark Headsman yet. But Stardust is actually available without having to get Oz's Axe this time around. You just need this kind of stuff. It's definitely a far more fitting location for this dang thing. Interesting to me that Dragon Axe the Tear Axe comes with spells. Kind of, okay. Granted, because of how defense is reworked in this one, you don't have to specifically build a AUG build in order to make those spells work, so essentially an Earthiverse followed up with a Vulcan Lance for a finisher is actually pretty good. But it's just kind of an interesting little addition that they added there. But most of the spears, despite being on spellcasters, don't have any spells on them, which I guess is honestly fine. It's funny to me that the Corny Licorn is not the Colnacroln anymore, so it's not I don't even know if that counts as English. Whatever the hell that was, it no longer is. Also, you no longer upgrade... so the Corny Licorn is just made out of unicorn horns. The Holy Lance, you just slap more unicorn horns on it. But the Ignis is upgraded straight out of the Damascus Spear instead of, again, needing a Knight Commander weapon for it. So this stuff is pretty standard as before. I found this one to be kind of a cool one. So to get, like, Bringer of Light, you need the Makwahatl, which, by the way, the Makwahatl does not come with the Petrifog anymore, so... Granted, it was kind of OP before because of, like, its stats are dramatically better. It just doesn't have the guaranteed petrification. So to get that, you need this. To get this, you actually need to go back to 1 HKs to get this in order to upgrade into that one. So I just love that it's like a 3-step process to get this one. It's just, it feels more appropriate. But I just thought that was neat. As far as cudgels go, seems like standard endgame thing right now is the +5. All the elemental staves, just like the OV version for staves there, have a charge effect on there, so that's pretty good there. Staff of Purification is very, very solid. So guaranteed exorcism on, well, a staff is just very handy to have around in general. You basically don't need to bother carrying around exorcism on your clerics at a certain point. The books still do the same thing as they always did. Actually, the books seem to have a hidden damage bonus. They've always had their plus 15% versus a racial type thing that they've got going on. But they do seem to hit quite hard despite having a relatively low attack value. I believe they might potentially use mental stats for a physical attack, but I'm not 100% certain on that. Okay, so... that's about it. Oh, actually, wait, no, that isn't about it. I'm just going to keep saying that and then walking it right back. I believe these bonuses on the armor might potentially, serve the same effect as the AUG from before. So, strengthens air, gives resistance to earth. Apparently, somebody has mentioned that the, I think it was like the Thunder Chain or something like that. Whatever the hell it is. You know, the light armor Thunder variant. I believe they mentioned that it does still have the wrong text on there, which, whatever. At this point, I would not be shocked if they intentionally kept that because they found it funny, but either way, it probably was another, they probably forgot about it, whatever. Architros and Mage's Mitts, by the way, and as well as the Architros trousers and Mage trousers, are actually worth getting this time because otherwise they're kind of locked into linen slops and basic gloves, so... very solid upgrades as soon as they're available. They're just basically plus 20 int on all of your casters, and it is noticeable. Like, they went up from 200s to 350s. It was pretty good. Pretty good. Okay. So yeah, I believe the elemental robes might potentially be providing a percentage bonus in the background. I'm not sure. Hopefully the data mining folks will be able to provide us with that information. But anyway, that should be everything for now. The only real other thing I guess I could really cover is finishers. There was a question over elemental availability for different finishers, which it's kind of all over the place, interestingly enough. So, like, for example, spears have only access to a lightning AUG like before, whereas fists get dark, but then they also have a neutral one that scales really well, and they get fire early. If we look at, let's see what else we got here. Two-handers, they're really solid on Canopus there because essentially he can, like Cyclone Saber got its range increased and it hits like a truck in his hands, but at the same time I've got a lightning team, so anytime Prevailing Element is going well, we can just go for Lightning Strike or Grand Cross for better just kind of close range damage there. For guns, they have access to light and wind, although as far as I'm aware, you can't scale light through a fusel, so it's just kind of for the purpose of taking advantage of dark weakness, I believe, which also didn't really seem to do very much when I was testing it, not especially next to Scattershot just hitting like an absolute truck. Like Scattershot feels like Death Whale used to back in the PSP version. Scattershot will basically instantly delete any Earth unit, just like no questions asked. Crossbow-wise, they've just got fire. Cudgel-wise, they are all going towards light. But also they seem to scale a weird mix of stats. Like this guy right here does 1 damage if he were to swing the cudgel normally. He can do 500 plus in an AoE with Pressure Whirl, though. So that's an odd one. Bows, I feel like, probably have the best finisher suite so far, because aside from being able to guarantee crits whenever they want, they've got Leaden on Dark Weight, they've got a Sleep Chance on Slumber Shot, they've got Charm and a Fire scaling on Flaming Blast, and then they've got Stop and Lightning scaling on Imperial, which definitely feels like Imperial is just, if you're making a push, it's going to be the strongest. Flaming Blast is a great, like, Hail Mary. Slumber Shot is just good if you can't reach somebody, and it's a little bit cheaper. And then Dark Weight is good if you're trying to focus somebody down early. Daggers are still awesome. I don't think I've actually gotten the final one on anybody yet, but for example, Heart Crusher, again, just deletes Earth units. Just Earth feels like they were having a bit of a hard time there. Ice definitely wins out in the early game with a lot of their finishers. Books basically start off with 3 finishers for all intents and purposes. Swords, again, are 3 neutral and 1 ice. 2 HKs are dark for their final one. Sun Blossom is a fire one, and then 2 neutrals. So obviously I haven't used all the weapon types or whatever else, haven't gotten all of them quite yet. But generally speaking, it feels like elemental finisher-wise, it feels like Earth is maybe seeing a bit of a harder time, though I will say axes do finish off with an Earth finisher, books start off with an Earth finisher, so they all more or less have an equivalent amount of stuff available, but I feel like lightning and fire end up getting the most options in general. Ice gets the best early start and then kind of drops off, which again, it's kind of something that they've always kind of been going for lore-wise. Because basically, like, lore-wise, Ice was supposed to be the thing that nobody could beat early on and then just kind of lost. That's why they put out all those stories over what all these different deities were doing. But okay, so, yeah, I will say there's definitely still more to discover. Again, at 45 at this point, but there's still new stuff coming up constantly, so I've been surprised how much they've still been drip-feeding, even into the post-game up to this point. It just keeps on going! Like, they just don't stop! There's just new crap coming up all the time. I'm actually looking forward to going through the Palace of the Dead yet again. I'm at, like, the fact that they redid the drops so that they're not set drops feels beautiful. It's just like, why didn't you leave this like the SNES version the whole time? It feels great. It's not like, man, I really hope that I can track down that one unit on that one floor and make sure that they roll that chance to go drop the bag, and if they don't drop the bag, I gotta spend another hour on that fight. No, it's just like, go friggin' Rambo your way through all that crap and just get it. It's great. It's absolutely wonderful. Oh, one more tiny thing. I don't believe Stick Shift used to function for undead. But Stick Shift does function for undead at this point. So, found Stick Shift, Putrefy, Life Force, Living Corpse, Banish, and Curse. They all seem to work like they did before. But anyway, that'll be that before I ramble on for another 10 billion years. Y'all have a good one, and take care.